Hey guys, I'm here to read you the one and only Ivan, and it looks like we are almost done. So, where we left off last time, we were reading about Ivan and this kind of mysterious painting that he is making. Um, on a bunch of pieces of paper, he is making a mural or a big painting, and he's trying to keep it secret. He's trying to keep it away from Max so that he doesn't sell them in the gift shop. So this tells us this must be a really special painting, and it has something to do with Ruby. Okay, so we haven't quite figured out what it is and why it's so important to Ivan. All right, the chapter we're on is called Chest Beating. Often when visitors come to see me, they beat their hands against their puny chests, pretending to be me. They pound away, soundless as the wet wings of a new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is not something you ever want to hear. Not even if you're wearing earplugs. Not even if you're 3 miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sound sends a whole jungle running, as if the sky has broken open, as if men with guns are near. Angry. Thump. The sound, my sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his key. The pile of pictures goes flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat the beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under knot tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry, at last. I have someone to protect. What do you think he's trying to protect? Puzzle pieces. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. What the heck was that? George demands. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down, thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asks. Probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't say I blame the guy. Stuck in that tiny cage all these years. So if we think back, Ivan is so mad because he shows Julia the paintings, right? And then her dad suggests that they give them to Mac to sell in the gift shop. So Ivan was trying to keep them secret and was hoping that Julia would understand what he was doing, but she really doesn't understand what he's trying to do. And so he is hoping, he wants to get those pictures back, and that's part of the reason he's probably so upset. Julia starts to answer, but she freezes. She cocks her head. She stares at her feet where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad, she whispers, come see this. I'm sure he's another remembrant, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. Dad, she says again. Seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze. I see blobs, many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home now? That's an H, Dad. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H in here. She grabs one more picture. Put this one here, and I don't know, maybe that one? You have an E. George rubs his eyes. I hold my breath. Julia is running now. She picks up one picture, sets it down. It's like a puzzle, Dad. This is something. It's a word, maybe words, and a picture of something, a giant picture. Jules, George says, this is crazy. But he's looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, says Julia. E, O. Julia chews her lower lip. H, E, O. It looks a lot like an I. H, E, O, I. George writes in the air with his finger. I, E, O, H. Not the letter, an actual I, and that's a foot, or maybe a tree, and a trunk, Dad. I think that's a trunk. Julia runs to the window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. She is taking much longer than I thought she would. Humans. Sometimes they make chimps look smart. Finally, Julia and George take the pictures to the ring, where there's room to set them all out. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them, I say. Yet. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fist in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. H-O-M-E, home. George gazes at the letters. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once-in-a-million kind of thing, like that old saying about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him long enough and he'll write a novel. I make a grumbling noise, as if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it? Julia demands. The picture of Ruby in the zoo? How do you know it's a zoo? George asks. See the circle on the gate? There's a red giraffe in it. George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's a logo for the zoo, Dad. It's on all of their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying there has to be a logical explanation. Look how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It's definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She chews her thumbnail. I see the question in her eye. She turns back to the paintings and stares at them, looking, truly looking. A slow smile draws on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea. A big idea. Julia races around the edge of the painting, her arms spread wide open. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants, he repeats slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia claps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard, no way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac will fire me, Jules. Julia considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everyone would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the word home on it in giant letters? George gestures towards my picture. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to be made by a gorilla. Exactly. And you want me to do this without Mac's permission? George asks. Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of my paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick, she walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet. Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help too. George sighs. He looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Principal. L-E, George corrects. Dad, Julia says softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quietly. It's in the storage locker. The next morning, I watch Mac's car slam to a halt in the parking lot. He leaps out. He stares at the billboard. His jaw is open. He doesn't move for a long time. Mad human. A mad gorilla is loud, but a mad human can be loud too, especially when he is throwing chairs and turning over tables and breaking the cotton candy machine. Phone call. Mac is kicking a trash can across the food court when the phone rings. He answers it, red-faced and sweating. What the? He demands. He glares at me. I don't know what you're... He starts to say, but then he stops to listen. Who? Julia who? He asks. Oh, sure, George's kid. She's the one who called you? More talking. With the phone to his ear, Mac comes closer to my cage, eyeing me suspiciously. Yeah, he says. He paints, sure. We've been selling his art for quite a while now. There's another long pause. Yeah, absolutely, it was my idea. Mac nods. A smile starts at the corner of his mouth. Photos? No problem. You want to see him in action? Come on down and have a look. We're open 365 days a year. Can't miss us. We're right off of I-95. Mac picks up the overturned trash can. Yeah, I think I'll be adding more pictures. It's what do you call it? A work in progress. When the call is done, Mac shakes his head. Impossible, he says. An hour later, a man with a camera comes to take my picture. He is from the local paper, the one that Julia called. How about you take one of me with the elephant, Max suggests. He drapes his arm around Ruby's back, grinning at the camera. Perfect, the man says. Perfect, Mac agrees. A star again. A photo of my billboard is in the newspaper. Mac tapes the story onto my window. Each day, more curious people arrive. They park in front of the billboard. They point and shake their head. They take photos. Then they come into the mall and buy my paintings. While visitors watch, I dip my hands in fresh buckets of paint. I make pictures for the gift shop and pictures to add to the billboard. Trees with birds, a newborn elephant with glittering black eyes, a squirrel, a bluebird, a worm. I even paid Bob so that he can be on the billboard too. I can tell he likes the picture, although he says I didn't quite capture his distinguished nose. Every afternoon, Mac and George add my new pictures to the billboard. People slow their cars while they work. Drivers honk and wave. My gift shop pictures now cost $65 with a frame. All right, we'll pause right there, and we'll pick up the next chapter we're going to read is The Ape Artist. Okay, thanks for listening, guys.